Yeah, let's get things moving here at Perryville. We don't have a lot of time. Confederates by default have the first turn. Gotta try to follow my orders. I hate following attack orders that I didn't write, and even worse, defend orders that I didn't write. But these aren't too terrible. Okay, so RW1, the counters in these older sets are inferior. Now, I like the low ammo and the bloodlust, the darker color, but these are inferior from even the Thunder set in terms of just the readability of these suckers. If you start looking at these, they're tough to see, especially some of the Union ones. Now, zooming in, it's not so bad, but with my eyes, these have gotten a lot rougher. Maybe the Thunder ones are just as bad, and my eyes were better. Another thing that's kind of interesting, you have a different, they settled on a different counter mix of the strength markers. In these older games, they cover AA, AB, A, and B, but not C level counters. As the game progressed, more and more people started playing it where they just wanted to keep track of weak units, because for the most part, when you fire on the combat table, A-level fire levels are what you want to fire. You can't split your fire, you can't do too many complicated things in this the way you can in, say, Great Battles of American Civil War. So, the only interesting thing was, is it an A-level fire level or is it less? And B's and C's became the only really important thing to mark, because if you're greater than A-level fire level in any hex, you're firing on the same chart. Well, that wasn't realized with these earlier games, so they provided everything but the C's, basically, and no triple A's either. So it became very much kind of a random choice. I'm going to be using these suckers as my C's, and because C's are important. Actually, another option would be to use the other side of the B's, the A's, as C's, but I'd rather use these suckers when I can, save as many B's as I can. B is the size that you're allowed to travel in column on a road if you're playing with that option, and I always do. All right, let's see what we got here then. So I got all kinds of orders, but not much that I'm doing. RW is advancing along Dug Road to attack First Corps. That's this command here. I've already set myself up in column. It's weird because one unit was specified in column in the game. Usually they don't do that, and it's kind of up to you to do whatever you like. All right, so then we follow the normal standard terrain effects chart, and if you look, a unit in column going across a ford is going to cost me +1 movement point. There are up elevation level only costs when you're in line. Doesn't look like we have any real terrain in this game. No slopes, nothing like that are severe enough to affect anything. So, you know, it's normal movement. What, 6 movement points? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now the question is, do I want to form up in line? Am I worried about the Union coming down? They can't see me with all these forests here, so I'm just going to move forward. But this unit's bigger, and since it moved using road movement, I'm going to take up a lot of space. Well, actually, if I form line, I don't take up that space because the rest of my unit magically catches up with me, which is kind of a weird thing in the game. All right, this next one. Oh, these are probably pikes. No, they're secondary roads. Well, I still get half movement point, so I actually could have gone 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I guess. All right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we'll do that, and so on. And then at the same time, the LW is going to be, let's see, moving across at the H bottom house over here to make an attack on the first corps. We're leaving the third corps out of play, pretty much. And the Union, one of their goals is to try to get it into this battle. Historically, they did not do much. I think one brigade gets moved over to help support them, which would be very, very hard to actually do within the game system. So basically, you either get the whole unit or you don't. All right. So here's where the Confederates have moved. Cav unit sliding around here, the others following their orders. This is kind of tricky because this is not crossable. It's a bridge, except in column. That makes it a more difficult positioning, but I can still convert to column, move across, convert back to line, and then engage. There's a lot of opportunity to move and change formations in this game. So, you know, there's not going to be opportunity fire or anything for doing that if I'm not right in the if I'm not right next to an opposing unit. So you might have, if the Federals could have defended right closer to the bridge, that would provide them with some advantage. But it does make it still kind of tricky to cross over. Now, what I do have, though, is I'm within artillery range of this gun here. And, oops, I'm having trouble with these. I kind of like these counters better than the later ones in terms of the texture. They have a little bit less gloss to them, and the map has less glossiness to it, so it works a little nicer. And this is, the map is kind of how I remember the TSS map. We'll see. I think it's a little bit uglier. We've got these kind of ugly colors in here, but... Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4. Range 4 is not a good range for artillery, but I got a lot of ammo. So I'm going to blow a quick point of ammo there. And I'm going to fire 5 guns at range 4. Now, 5 guns at range 4 would normally be a 1-point fire, but fire is halved at ranges greater than 3 against pure infantry. I seem to be missing a die. Son of a bitch. It's the important one, too. I swear I pulled two of these out. I must have eaten one of them. Grab a fistful of dice. If you remember from the other game, the white dice is my main combat die that's going to be on here. I'm using a red one instead of a blue one this time as the first die over on the morale table. That's going to be an 1166 roll. The little red die is the rounding die. If I get a half on here, when it's high, that counts as a 1. And the yellow die is yellow, so it's for stragglers. And so we're firing on the less than 1 chart, which really isn't worth doing, but it's what I want to do. You can split guns, so I could actually, but you can't split them so that they're each on the less than 1 chart. So I don't get a hit there. I just wasted some ammo. And really all I could have been hoping to do is kind of disrupt this situation a little bit. Nothing exciting happening on the Confederate side in terms of, you know, new orders or anything. Their orders are fixed. For the Union, I'm going to want to get Thomas over here so that maybe he'll wake up those troops and get them moving. He's not that bad. And we'll go over. Uh-oh. Oh, that sucks. One of those things in the counters are a little different from what I'm used to. The later counters have a way to indicate, they have flip sides. So the Union would be on the other side of the turn counter. So now I'd know it was the Union turn. And I kind of gotten used to that. Well, the Union didn't get to do much in their turn. They stretched out my line a little bit. To provide a more defensive position, I had a unit back here that was able to pull into play, slid some things over. That looks a little stronger. Drop back to where the artillery was, or is, because otherwise I'm kind of, well, probably not blocking the line of sight from what I understand. but if the Confederates get close enough that I can actually do any damage to them, I was. It's not like the Confederates are going to set up for an artillery duel here and start straggling my troops. Thomas, I ran over here. I don't know where he's supposed to start, but he went over here. Both he and Buell failed to get initiative rolls, so no new orders coming. Now, I could roll for initiative for other units, too. It doesn't matter that I'm rolling for Thomas, and certainly not for Buell. Like in the Antietam game, you're allowed to roll for multiple levels of command initiative here, just because the army commanders have to roll for initiative to do anything. Buell can issue orders at will if he ever gets his initiative. Thomas, well, he needs an 11 or higher to write an order, and he has to roll at a specific time. He has to roll for each specific order. The extent of this battle is so small, though, that first of all, neither one's likely to get an initiative. But even if they do, they're not liable to... let me move this guy up a little bit. They're not liable to actually... be issuing more than one order. Like if Buell issues an order, it'll probably be something here to this... why does that say 11-3? Oh, this is the third corps. This is first corps. I keep getting confused. He'd probably issue something to the third corps to try to trap the Confederate forces here. This is really a tiny, tiny little slice of battle in the historical scenario. The other scenarios are somewhat larger. Not Antietam size, certainly not Thunder size, the Gettysburg type game, but yeah, it gets more to the same level as some of the smaller games in this series. If you're looking at, I don't know, I'm thinking something like Champion Hill here, or Murfreesboro. I don't remember what's that's actually called. No Better Place to Die, I think. Okay, so here we are on the 2 p.m. turn, and the rebel right wing is deploying itself in the woods into position to launch its attack. They're in range now for it. I sent the artillery around to support the cav here. I don't want to move up with the cav yet. I'm planning on kind of trying to flank with them as much as I can. Unfortunately, I think my orders don't really allow it too much. I have to attack along Benton Road. Well, that's this, so I can't exactly be sliding out here too far. I'll try to get rearward attacks. That's what I would have aimed to do, but it's hard to write orders that allow you to do that. You could write, I allow it. I never see it in the game, but kind of, try to skirt the Union left flank and close if you have good, enfilading fire, but otherwise don't. That's kind of cool for things like cav, because they have mobility but not a lot of staying power in a fight. But these poor suckers have orders to keep moving, and there's not much I can do about that. Over here we've got the left wing actually pretty much had to cross the river, and they have this very small frontage. So these are densely packed units. No more line extensions there. I've actually got 2 full units behind and another one on the road. Now, we're going to take a look at least one fire combat here. I throw my little loss sheets into play, and I'll add marks for those C's over here as I need them. Just to add them in if needed. Okay. So the Union gets first chance to return fire. Let me make sure my units are all correctly marked. See, that's got 2 A's, so it can have its extension. This also has 3 A's in its size, so that can have its extension. And I think I've checked them all, but those are the ones that are going to be firing because the range is 2. Now, if you've watched some of my others, you've seen the combat charts, the combat system already. I've done some fire before here, though. So I'm going to combine the fire from these 2 on this hex. The artillery, I think I'm going to fire here, and then these 2 are going to, actually 3 are going to combine fire on this. So that looks like the best way of doing it. It's a good idea to do combined fire from one unit, even if it's got extended lines, for the simple fact that you're only making one die roll. If you get a low ammo result, you end up putting 2 units under low ammo, and that requires 2 different points from the ammo cart to replace. Okay, so 2 infantry, we looked that up. At range 1 is going to be $4 each, or 4 points each for A's. So I'm on the 8 table. All very simple. Not a lot you can do here. You don't have the ability to, you know, split fire and tweak things the way you do, say, in I think TSS you can do that. I certainly used to play it that way. Although I used to play this so you could, to some extent. So we're on the 8 table. A 6 says I'm going to get a hit. And now I got to find me a pencil. What have I just hit? I've just hit JALW. Now some games have a casualty track. This one doesn't worry about it. So I look for JALW. It takes a hit. And now it's moved from size AB down to size A, which doesn't affect its fire ability. I've got a leader there, so I have to make a leader loss check. I like to do that first. That's on this table here. You can see a 2 or an 11 or higher. And we don't get a leader loss check, or a leader loss. I don't need the rounding die. Yeah, this doesn't look pleasant. The unit has a C morale. So, since it took 1 hit, it'll be on this chart. A 5 says I straggle 1. Mark that off. This is just the mechanical aspect of the game. It may seem a little bit cumbersome, but it works pretty well using all those dice in one big roll. I've got a C morale, but I have a modifier. I have a leader there, which sends my morale up 1 level to here. Now I still get a 66, which is routed back to straggle 3. The asterisks there have to do with whether I have to retreat if I'm stacked with guns. So that's 3 stragglers. And this brigade is nearly wrecked already. And I grabbed me a pretty little route marker. And now I've got to run. And here it gets ugly. Because a unit that routes, if it enters the hex of another unit, that other unit routes. But you are allowed to kind of fall back. So I'll limber my guns. If I was in a location next to somebody, that would cause, it's pretty impressive actually with this tight frontage, because I can't cross this river. So that might have caused a gun loss check if I was in plus fire from other things. So these guys are routed. They're going to have to retreat. It's only 2 spaces. The straggle is 3. Now, I better hope that I rally these poor suckers, because if I don't, they're going to have to route through my line and send everybody, scattering out of their way, basically. So that was the first fire. The second fire I was going to do is the artillery here. Artillery I always have to fire ammo for. In the game, as long as I can trace a line back to my, not headquarters, but my army supply wagon, which is back there, I'm okay. I can expend a round. So now I have, this is a different chart for determining firepower. 5 combat value, or 5 guns at a range of 1 gives me a 5 combat value. And I'll be rolling the same kind of thing over on here. Now, my feeling is the 5 to 6 chart is the first chart where you'll almost certainly get a hit, but the 3 to 4 chart gives you a very good chance of a hit. Anything below that, I kind of look at it as kind of crappy shots, and anything above that is gravy that is nice to have, but you don't want to, you don't want to say combine fire between all this infantry and that artillery if you've got other good shots somewhere, because you want to distribute your casualties usually on the enemy's units. Okay. 5. This is cool because I get a half, which means I deal with this rounding die here. It's low, so no additional losses. No loss is going to occur from it. This is the BALW, which has a C morale. It takes no losses. I worry about this C with the straggler. No straggle occurs. I do still have to make a morale check because it took a possible loss check there. And that's no effect. Had I rolled a little lower, I would get one of those cool bloodlust markers. And I'll continue with the rest of the fires. The other fire did some casualties, gave a shaken status to this unit, which just doesn't really do anything except decreases its morale, makes it easier to cause it to break. It causes a 1 level penalty on here, and if a shaken gets another shaken, it becomes disordered. Disordered has some effects on fire, as well as the unit's ability to take casualties. It gives bonuses to the firepower going into it. Over here, I decided not to fire my artillery. There's no real great reason to choose not to. Let me think about this. I have 2 cannons, 2 batteries. I probably should fire on the off chance that I can get a hit, because I'm thinking this game is only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 turns. I'm probably not going to get to fire my artillery at night. Probably not here either. But anyway, let's say it's 10 turns with 2 firing opportunities a turn. That's 20 rounds. Doubled for 2 batteries brings it to 40 rounds of ammo. You know, I've got 80 rounds, so I might as well fire every time. Normally, early in a battle, I know that I'm going to be using up my ammo, and I don't really want to fire, because at this point, firing from here, I'm going to be on the 1/2 table. Chances are the best I'm going to get is a morale check. But there's no real harm in firing in this game. Ammo is not a limitation on the Union for sure, and probably not for the Confederates either. They have, what, 65 rounds? They have more artillery though. Okay, well, that artillery didn't do anything, and it wasn't expected to. On the Confederate side, they got to fire back, and I learned one interesting thing, ignoring that bloodlust for a moment. The Union Army sucks here. Well, at least this unit really does. It's a demorale. But we're not talking about a terribly good force, whereas the Confederate Army largely looks to be fair quality. Having a D in your army just is bad, and especially having one that's fairly large. But you can see most of them look like C's. The worse your morale, the harder a job you have staying in the battlefield. Now, these guys are bloodlusted. I don't know what their morale was, but I rolled an 11, and as long as they're not E's, an 11 was going to work. That doesn't put any specific restriction on them, although it actually prevents them from taking straggler recovery if that was an issue. But it does mean that they don't suffer normal morale checks while they have that marker on them. They suffer bloodlust morale checks, which means they can essentially make a charge into an enemy's hex and be assured of staying. And that's a very powerful little assurance, because it means once you trade fire, you're going to still be there afterwards. The other guy may not, and you force them to take a morale check with a heavy penalty, -4 columns on it, and you probably have a good chance of driving them out of the hex. If not, at least you come down and there's this this close combat resolution, where it's based on the size of the forces involved in the attack. The more weight gets in there. So now we go to a sort of a rally phase, and this is, as I've said in other games of this type, kind of a mechanical process where all the Confederates' morale states move towards normal, with the exception of the route. That I have to check. Now he has a level 2 leader. That improves his morale by 1 level. You subtract 1 off the difference. That means he needs a 1 or 2 normally, so he needs a 1 through 3 to recover from the route. He doesn't get it, so now he has to get 6 hexes away by the most expedient route, which is not across the river. There's no way out back this way. The only way out is through here. So he's going to be going 1, let's see, 1, 2. He's going to be back here somewhere. So he's going to be moving through this space. That means I'm going to have to pull this guy out of here. Let's get this out of the way. He's no longer doing road movement. He's going to be shaken. This guy here is going to have to fall back 2 hexes. The guns will be limbered for him to be able to move them. And because he got displaced, God, this is hard to do with one hand tied behind my back, because he got knocked back 2 hexes by this unit. 1 for this hex, 1 for this hex. He's going to be down 2 morale states. This is just my headquarters, that's fine. And now I gotta fall back 1. I'm back there. I might want to take Hardy with me. He improves my chances of surviving that, of rallying next turn. But I've just disrupted this whole formation that was attacking with that one route roll that started things off. And now we go to the Union turn. This is the first time I've played with core defensive orders, and the Union, since it's their turn, are going to have to cope with this. I'm not sure of the exact ordering. I think I actually roll the initiatives first. So I've got initiatives. I roll 1 for Buell. If I get 1 for Thomas, I'll write orders. You don't have to do it until you get it. Let's do Buell first. Oh, geez, he's got 1. And Thomas does not. So Buell can start writing orders, and I'm going to think about something to write here. But, well, actually, I'm not going to. I'm going to call my commander over. Buell's woken up. He's involved in this battle. But if I write orders for this turn, there'll be aid delivered. The time involved in getting that to the leader is just as long as getting the leader to Buell along this road, and it'll reduce the chances of actually the order being accepted. So I should have already had him back there to try to talk Buell into doing something, but this is more realistic. Anyway, I have to make a core defense check for the first corps here. Now, the first corps has taken no losses, which means I actually don't have to. Let's look at our leader. Our corps leader is got a leadership rating of 1. Now, if this were corps attack stoppage, I would be looking at no wreck divisions versus 1. Well, actually, no, there's more than 1 division in this thing, isn't there? There's 2 divisions in this corps. So versus 2 divisions in the corps. And that puts me over on the 4 table. No. No wreck division 2. That puts me on the 1 column here. And I've got a 1 leadership. That means I need to roll a 3 or better. But because it's a core defense rather than attack stoppage, I have a +2 to the die roll. So I cannot possibly fail. But that shows you what the Confederates are going to have to face. Basically, unless you have a lousy leader, you have some chance of failure, but it's very, very minimal. It's a 1 in 36 each time, just what we got for Buell. Anyway, nothing exciting going to happen here. I'm just going to reposition the Union a little bit, probably. I may do that close combat here. That can be interesting. Okay, well, Union fired. The Confederates got to fire first, but the Union has the overwhelming advantage in firepower along here. So they got to fire back with some very heavy losses. You can see this is going to be the LW section. They've, I think they took 3 more casualties and significant stragglers over here. That whole section of the attack is kind of collapsing at this point. And I moved my corps general back here. He leaves the headquarters here. That headquarters is kind of bolted down because he's on defensive orders right now. And when it can move, it can only advance when it's on movement orders, really. It can only try to reposition where the center of the corps is going to be, or not necessarily the center, but the location from which the corps command orders go. Now, what's kind of interesting is orders are a mixed bag. If you're not playing with defensive orders, or if you're not specifying defensive orders, even if you're playing without them, you might still specify defenses like they do at the beginning of the game. The way the rules work is, hey, you put that core center down and you're pretty much free to do whatever you like within that core center. If you start playing with defensive orders, at least in some intention, even if not with the full extent of the rules, you kind of start bending that, because you're giving specific orders of what you're supposed to defend and focus on. So you can't just swing the front around to here without any, without any orders to do so. Just you do have some right to send a couple of units over to try to screen it, maybe to send a whole division over there, but you have to maintain the focus of the defense that you have. And I like that a lot better. I don't like the freedom that, hey, here's my core headquarters is. In a sense, that obviates the whole issue that I had over with the Antietam game, because when you play with core defensive orders, you're defining what the units can do, and you use individual divisional orders in the same sort of way, and you no longer really need to bolt something down in the same way, even if the rules say you do. Of course, that's one game where they say you can't play with them. Anyway, that's just my take on it. I play with the rules different ways. So now we have the recovery, and we just have one little interesting thing here. This comes off, obviously. But Bloodlust, like I said, if he was not adjacent to an enemy unit, he'd automatically lose his Bloodlust. But instead, he has to make a check on it, and he gets to keep it because it's in the range where it does not go away. Bloodlust is kind of cool. It means that, hey, I mean, if you make an attack in the close combat, I chose not to do that, but it means you can't fail that roll. But it also means you get your shot on your turn. So the Confederates fired. They could have taken that Bloodlust away, but they couldn't have pushed the unit back the way one of these Confederate units was pushed back by, unlikely long-range artillery fire. This actually disrupts their attack somewhat. It's a unit that they can't throw into the attack with any safeness. You don't want to send disorganized units into battle because, among other things, they take a +2 to the column on the fire table. So if you fire at disorganized units, you hit them more likely. Their firepower is halved when firing, and then over here, when they're on the morale table, they're going to be taking a -3 to the row that they face on that, which means they're much more likely to break. So if you advance with disorganized units, they're probably going to get shot up and run away, and even if they do stick around, they're not going to be able to shoot as well. So that's the problem that the Confederates are facing, is that their attacks have been really disorganized. And with Buell in the game and actually acting, I think we're going to see their overall attack just failing pretty heavily. Confederates slide themselves over onto this position. Now, you could argue perhaps that this RW doesn't really have the right to do this. It's advancing via Doug Road. This is Doug Road, right? But it stops here, and then its orders are to attack First Corps to capture intersection of Mackville and Bonton Roads, or however I have it, which is up here, or Benton Roads. I feel like this shift is allowable. Some people might argue, no, you're supposed to just cut through the forest or whatever. Well, I don't want to. And in particular, what I want to do is limit the casualties by shortening the front. I've got my artillery. This is a standard trick that I like to do. I pull my artillery up 2 hexes behind. Now, if I unlimber it 2 hexes behind in sight of the enemy, they can shoot me. But I'm doing it behind my own troops, so they're unlimbered in cover. That means if I get knocked back through a bad result check, morale check, then I get to fire my artillery. Now, most bad result chance on the morale check will be a disordered or worse, in which case that's not that big a bonus. But it does allow me to set my artillery up there, and then I can pull back and engage in a longer range duel if I so desire. I don't have to, but it gives me some extra backbone to my units. These guys I pushed forward as much as I can. Neither core they are essentially core for all purposes in this game, even though their wings suffered a failure. Unlikely to do so. I still haven't wrecked either one. You mark that with, let's see, the number of divisions that is wrecked is what's important when you're looking onto here. And as we see, we haven't even had a brigade get wrecked yet. So as we start to see units falling away, we have to worry more. One thing you're not seeing, and well, you wouldn't see on this turn, but on every starred turn you can see, is straggler recovery attempts. You're not seeing much of that in this. This is such a tiny battle. I feel like I have to, get my casualties in quick. But remember, I do get penalized in victory points for wrecked brigades, even if they're just wrecked by stragglers. Those are worth 1 victory point each. Kind of cute situation happening here. First of all, the Union has already fired their defensive fire, and again they did some significant casualties. They managed to hit Cheatham there. I'm never sure how to pronounce that, but and he was wounded, and now he's been flipped over to his replacement counter, who essentially has no effect except to command. A 1 rating means you're neither good nor bad, and that's what the most replacements usually are. And we didn't disrupt things here any worse. But now on the Confederate fire back, I started shooting down here, and this fired first. The unit under here, that's what the line extension refers to. You can extend 2 extensions off a unit, 1 in each direction essentially. And you can't have extensions stacked together, so you can't get weird stuff like that. It really caused some of the first blood here. We had some here, but on a Union unit. Now this is a pretty good morale unit. It's this bloodlusted unit, but he just took a shaken back 1 result. Now, if I fall back here, I'm going to pull the bloodlusted unit off, and he loses a morale level. But instead, if I pull back in this direction, I end up being able to still face this unit, so I don't pull it off the line and it doesn't lose its bloodlust. Had I pulled it off, then my artillery would still be in that location and would be able to be picked off by the Confederate fire on the next hex. And I'd rather have the infantry protecting the artillery. You don't want artillery exposed like that. Artillery is not important for victory points in this scenario, or in many of the games in the CWB, but it is so important to winning the battle defensively, to having your artillery still there, that you really don't want to see it get chewed up. Now this unit over here was firing into here. I left this one out because, well, I've got this marker here, but that's a C-sized unit. That's why I'm using that marker, if you recall. It's got 2 values on it. The size is this side. The bigger one is the morale rating for it. Morale rating, generally I'm using the combat charts when I'm looking at my morale, so I don't really worry too much about that. Anyway, this guy fired into here, and I rolled an 11. An 11 or 12 over here is when you get low ammo when you're firing small arms only. The RSS has low ammo results for artillery as well, which actually kind of makes sense the way these games are handled, with the artillery ammo on a track indicating some kind of, there could be a local reduction in the total artillery ammo, so you couldn't use that. Anyway, that marker's there. Now that's going to provide, if you look over here, every time it fires, provides it a -1 on the fire column that it uses from now on until it fixes that. You never run out of ammo in this game, you're just low ammo. I think RSS actually has a out of ammo aspect as well. I've got to bring this thing up within 2 hexes of it. And then at the end of my turn, if I've got it at 2 hexes, I'll be able to expend one of these. And I can refill those by getting within range of the army supply train, which can't leave roads. And that'll simply remove the marker. But obviously, I'm going to be sitting up here in the front with low ammo through the Union turn and through the firing of my turn. This happens during the rally phase because I don't have this thing up into range yet. In fact, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm not going to get in range next turn either. The problem is the wagon trains are about the only thing that pays 1 movement point to move on the roads, on the secondary roads. On primary roads, it works fine. These look like primary roads for most games in the system, but there are no primary roads in this game. They're just secondary. So anyway, now I resolved the hits that I did. I was on the 3 or 4 table. When you run out of ammo, you tend to do a lot of damage as kind of a consolation. So I had a 1.5 rounded up, goes to 2 hits on the 28-3-1. See morale. See straggle over here on the heavier straggling table says I straggle 1. And this all is second nature. And then the 25 was my morale roll on a C morale. I don't have to look all this up is basically what I'm saying. And that's not going to be any effect. I know all the modifiers. I've internalized that all. That's what you really have to do to play this effectively. And it doesn't take a lot of effort. It takes a few turns of combat and you're right there. And then the rebels did a mixed blessing shot here as well, where they got the low ammo marker. You can see they bloodlusted 1 Union unit there. But this unit next to it, this was that kind of crappy unit that I shifted over. He's sitting on top of the cannon, which is not a good place to have your low morale stuff usually. But I figured, or I can say I did, I'm not that clever, that the Confederates wouldn't necessarily be closing, and they didn't, and they may not even be firing. They could have combined fire here for the 6 column, but I went for a 2 column shot primarily, not knowing the quality of that unit, but knowing that I'd like to screw with the gun a little bit, because that thing's going to cause me problems. Well, I succeeded in screwing with it with an 11 roll against that thing, which caused a hit, even at that range, but it also caused the low ammo. Well, with a D morale, it's going to straggle, but with a D morale even worse, a 63 result. Now I go up 1 because the artillery, that's one of the modifiers over here. If you're stacked with artillery, the infantry gets a bonus if it's stacked with unlimbered artillery. So I went from D to D+, but that's still enough to get me a disorganized back to straggle 1 with 2 stars, which means I can't ignore the disorganized. Any result lower than that, disorganized back 1, shaken back 1 with the star, I could ignore the retreat because I had, I would still take the change in my morale, but I could ignore the actual retreat effect. And I'm going to pull this back like this. I hope that was a back 1. I think it's back 2, actually. Yeah. Okay. So I can go back 1, and then my back 2 has to be to here. I've limbered the guns. I'm safe because I wasn't in that. This guy gets pulled back with me because I'm part of that unit. And he, because he got moved as well, is now shaken. And now we've got this big gaping hole in the center of my line. The Confederates could easily take advantage of that. Luckily, the Union gets to go next. They can pull back and try to dress their line into a better formation. Okay, so here we are on the Union side of the 230 turn. And, well, Buell's available. I haven't rolled to see if Thomas gets an initiative. I can do that too. He does not. I have to roll a core defense stoppage for this. I've written some orders for Buell. I'll talk about those in a moment. But first I have to do the core defense stoppage. It can't possibly fail because I still have no wreck divisions. Great. Okay. So in terms of the Buell order, Buell is sending an order to Gilbert. Now I'm playing with the full 3.0 rules. I understand there's a vassal module for this with a training thing. It's probably on the rules that come with this game, which are the 2.1 revised or something. No, second edition revised, whatever. That's probably 2.0. Most of what I have is 2.1. These have some different factors in them. The charts may be a little different. You know, these series evolve over time. The core is pretty much the same, but let's go a little into what I've done. So first thing I do is I write down an arrival time for the order. I write down which unit it is that's got the order. An arrival time, 2:30. We're in the same hex. So all that's happening is Buell is telling Gilbert, dude, do this. Because they're in the same hex, I can use an imperson verbal. That's what the I stands there. C is it's a complex order. I'm writing an order that's going to involve attacking or moving through territory that I don't really control. This is a vague idea. In this map, it's pretty easy to tell, but sometimes it's hard to decide whether or not you're writing a complex or a simple order. If the word attack is in there anywhere, it's a complex order. If it's not, though, let's say I was repositioning my units back here, well, that probably is a simple order. Here's the thing. If I come to a position where I'd have to enter small arms range to continue my order as envisioned, I've got to stop. My order's just stopped there. All right. And then the final thing is the force of the order. Now, you have three choices with force, 0, 1, or 2. In the base game, the one that Perryville was written for, you pretty much can choose whatever you like. So I have a leader rating 0. I'm allowed to expend 10 points. An oral order cost me 2. Force 2 would cost me 3. Complex cost me 3. Hey, that cost me 7 of my 10 that I can spend every turn. I got no problem. When we go to the series rules version 3, though, there's a penalty to using force in orders. And in particular, that penalty is for each point of force you have, you gather a point against you, essentially, against the commanding officer, against the army as a whole. Those points will be expressed as anti-initiatives here. And because I used force 1, I collected anti-initiative. As soon as those anti-initiative points exceed the square of the leader rating of the army commander, which is right away in the case of Buell, you start getting actual penalties for having collected these points. Now, this is a bad choice of terms because the term is used for something else in the game. They should have defined a new term for this. But anyway, the something else is, for example, Gilbert here has an anti-initiative associated with him of 1, which means anytime he rolls on the initiative table, he rolls as if he's 1 worse than he is. Now, unfortunately, that means nothing in this game. I don't know if he's just incapable of getting initiative because of that. That might be the answer there, because it should be a column shift. But there's no column there. Anyway, I'm not going to roll for initiative with him. Because Buell is able to issue this order, well, I had the choice of using 1 or 2 anti-initiative, or 1 or 2 force, or none. I chose to use 1 because, and let's add up what we're going to see here. We add the rating of the 2 leaders. 0 plus 0 is 0. The method is imperson verbal. That puts me to 2. Let's ignore the force for a minute. Minus 2 for complex. Yes. Gets me back to 0. Now, there's a table here for 0 to 1, which means if I went to a force 2 order, I wouldn't gain a column shift on it. So I went with force 1, which gives me that column shift. Well, I get the same column shift off force 1 or 2. If I stayed at force 0, I would have been down at the -1 column. But there's a problem. I currently have orders. I have defensive orders. Those count against you. So I'm going to get a shift against me. And then I'll roll on this table to see what happens. And I roll a 12, which means DT, the order is distorted. The order is destroyed, basically. He didn't actually take it. And with the high chance of a distorted order, I probably shouldn't have written out my whole order. I did do so, however, and I'll probably write the same order next turn. Gilbert will stick around and try to understand what the hell Buell is talking about. He's in a lot of pain. He fell off a horse, he probably cursing and everything in there. And as understandable as I am. What I wanted to do was move down, take Perryville, and then send the rest of the forces up. Why? Perryville's the one terrain location in this game that's worth anything. It's worth 3 points. And then sending the forces up here to attack the rear of the Confederate line. Not cross the river, but just put pressure on them there. Would have created sort of a pincer move that could cause a lot of trouble for the Confederates there. Because it looks to me overall the Union's doing a pretty good job of defending along this ridge line here. All right, well, the Union's not going to get to do anything. Thomas didn't get his initiative, so I'll try to recover my line position here and probably fall back. I kind of advertised, I've kind of pulled back from here and shifted my forces in front. Now, if you look at my orders, you might start to say, well, wait a minute, can the First Corps do that? Defend the ridge between 2725 and Hart's house. 2725 is here. Where's Hart's house? That's down here. Whoa, I was already not defending everything I'm supposed to. Yeah, I know. I kind of actually don't like this order because I wasn't sitting where I was supposed to be to begin with. My feeling with this, first of all, if you weren't playing with defensive orders, you'd had absolute freedom to do what I did. You wouldn't have any requirement to be in any area. You just have a requirement to be within range of this sucker. But playing with defensive orders, I like to think of the orders as a little bit more restrictive on both sides, really, not just the defensive ones. But not to the point where I can't fall back and dress my line and try to hold things together as best as I can. And in this case, screening this disordered position is an important factor to what I'm doing. Another thing is, this unit here, the 2831, that's what this is a line extension for. Excuse me, I'm trying to see if I can see. And because it's taken some losses, I wanted to check. Now, it's a pretty big unit. It's still AA, so both counters of it are still A firepower. But that gets me out of close range from the Confederates, so they're going to have to continue forward if they want to attack the flank there. Over here, I turned this unit, kept this shaken unit back a little bit and pulled the cav forward to get a little bit more firepower in place. That's a B-rated sized unit, which means that it adds C-sized units like this cav back here. Do not add anything essentially at long range. They only add a half point, so it takes a couple of them to get you any possibility. But a B adds a whole point to a range 2 fire, so there's a possibility that I can get additional fire on this unit by having that in place. In particular, I think this is an A-sized unit, so that'll be 2-3. I can shoot here. Then this unit can fire all of its fire into there. I also have artillery under there, so I have a lot of firepower still coming in against the Confederates. In a sense, moving this cav up gives me a little bit of an edge that I would have gotten the same effect by moving forward, but now I'm at less risk with the units that I'm putting the fire in. I don't want to put this shaking unit up there because if he takes casualties, there's a good chance he'll just break and run. But where he is, the Confederates are faced with a choice between firing at the shaken unit and maybe driving it back a little bit, and they would take this with it, or it's the same unit, or firing at the bloodlusted portion of that unit, which is not going to budge it. And that's a tough call. Do you want to cause casualties, which you'll be more likely to do at close range fire, or do you want to have some morale effect, which you're only going to get at the longer range? Confederates fired at the bloodlusted units, hoping to cause real casualties. I always like doing them more, although in this short game there may be reasons you kind of want to drive the Union back, maybe get more straggler effects or whatever than you'd get off. Well, you're still more likely to get stragglers off the bloodlust. So casualties are the way to win this game for the most part, other than Perryville, which could be worth significant points. So I fired at the unit. Also getting that bloodlust off there, getting another shot at getting it off. It didn't come off would be helpful. Now, on the Union refire, I've concentrated this fire on the JBLW here, and I caused some casualties, and you'll see something here. JBLW is, I'm having trouble controlling this. JBLW is the Johnson unit here. You can see it's taken enough casualties to use up its A rank. It's down to a B-sized unit, and because that changes the firing value, now I'm using a marker to indicate that. Then I fired at this thing. I fired this unit and the artillery. That's 9 strength points at it. Ended up doing 2 casualties to the BALW, right? The BALW has taken enough hits. Now, stragglers that were... So, I should explain this. This spot was a straggler before. By marking a loss there, it moves the straggler down another space, and then additional stragglers took the unit not just to a B. I've got to replace the counter there, and I'll put a little B there just like I did with the other one. But perhaps more importantly, it has taken me past this checkpoint, which means the unit is now wrecked. That's marked here in the divisional wreck. Now, if another unit gets wrecked, the whole division is considered wrecked, which has an effect on the core attack stoppage. Now I take my straggle effect, and I'm a wrecked unit, which is important. So I was an A morale. I think I actually already took this. And I was on the 1.5. I rolled a 5. Actually, I rolled a 7 because you get +2 for being a wrecked unit. According to this, a wrecked brigade gets +2. I was already wrecked before I took that, so I should take another straggler that I didn't mark. And now, I am a wrecked brigade of an unwrecked division. And that gives me a -4 to my morale check. Now, if I was a wrecked brigade or a wrecked division, instead I'd take a -6. So, this is a pretty good unit here, right? I don't remember. This is the BALW. That's not all that good. This is a C morale unit. That's not terribly good at all. I don't think I took the... straggle. I think I owe it at least 1 more straggler. Probably 2. Okay, so that's gone down to a C-size unit. See, using the camera disrupts my pattern. Since I don't have C markers in this game, they show up in the later games. I'm going to use this AA there. Those are useless to me. Okay. Now, this is the BALW. It's a C morale unit, and it goes down 2, 4, down to the E chart, basically, that many rows down. But I rolled a 24. That's just going to be a shaken result. So a 24 is a pretty good roll, pretty solid. But once a unit starts losing its value, you can see it's almost impossible to stay in the fight once you start getting to, say, the bottom of the column. Now, I wasn't that far below. I'm more than halfway down the chart here already. If I took a flank shot or something, it would be much, much worse. And now I've got this one last unit here. And the Confederates are really, really getting their asses handed to them on this attack, it looks like. They took no casualties on this unit, or none that ended up marking. They did take a straggler loss. Basically, they took enough of a hit to get them on the 1/2 table. The rounding die didn't get them, but they took enough of a straggle to be affected, and then they got a big nasty roll of 64 over here, which disordered them and sent them back a hex. They stacked with the artillery there, but they drove this unit back. This unit withdrew from the hex. So this unit goes down to shaken. The artillery is also disordered, as is this unit. I didn't want to limber the guns though and move them back. I figure I can probably screen them or whatever. It doesn't really change my position to have the artillery more disordered, or disordered rather than shaken. So it seemed good to keep it in place. Now I get my recovery, right? Oh no, this was the Union. Yeah, the Union gets their recovery. Now this bloodlusted unit is no longer bloodlusted. You have to kind of do these in order. Bloodlusts you can do whenever you like, really. But the other things, do the shakens before you do the disorders. And then you convert the disorders to shakens. Obviously you can do this by locale. And then any routeds would make their rolls to go down to disorder. And the bloodlusted unit somewhere in there has to make a check because he is adjacent. He gets to keep his bloodlust. This is good that I'm getting these counters back because I'm almost out of, those were I was out of shaken and disordered counters. And I would not like to have to dig into another game to get them. The Confederates are in bad shape overall there. All right, let's send this one up. Normally, this battle is so tiny, I could have done it all on one video, but I figure what's the point of doing this battle except to go into some detail of what I'm doing. If you want to see the actual rules explanation, I do that over mainly in South Mountain, but that's for the RSS system. I didn't want to go through the whole series rules again. I think the playthrough is enough. I can't teach you all of the game no matter what. There's just, there's so many little things to it, but I can kind of show you a lot of the stuff that kind of comes naturally or automatically to me. I don't know what the intro to this one was about, but let's send this one up. It's gotten big enough.